Hello and welcome to my wonderful chat, to the wonderful listeners out there. I have some fantastic guests for you tonight. We're started just a minute or two early, but we're right on time for this conversation. I would love to introduce you to the guests we have tonight. So, Mark and Carol Nesbitt have been living in Gettysburg and interested in historic aspects of that wonderful battlefield town for quite a while. Mark was a National Park Service ranger for several years, which led him on a path to paranormal experiences and into the paranormal investigation field. Dr. Catherine Ramsland is a professor of forensic psychology at DeSales University in Pennsylvania, actively writes a very interesting blog for Psychology Today, and both are prolific writers. Mark is known for his Ghosts of Gettysburg series, ghost hunter field guides, and historic accounts like 35 Days to Gettysburg, one of my favorites. Dr. Ramsland has an extensive library of titles, including Inside the Minds of Serial Killers and Forensic Psychology of Criminal Minds. She also has veered off in other directions, such as Vampires and Bethlehem Ghosts and many other titles. Welcome in, everybody.
Thank you, Cisco.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. And I'm not going to eat up any more of this wonderful time spent with you guys. Like I told Mark and Carol, I could just list off all the books and the titles, and boom, we're done. So what I would love to know for this fantastic chat, and for just a second, I'd like to talk to my mods here. Hi, Jackie, and everybody in here, Divine. I'm going to lean to my wonderful mods to try to get the chat. Welcome in everybody who's new. Let's keep questions down to the very end, because I think you're going to have a wonderful time just listening to everything that these three have been up to. So for that, I would love to start with, how did this journey between the three of you start? And on that journey, what was most intriguing to you at this point? Go ahead. Catherine, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'll start because I featured Mark in a book called Ghost Investigating the Other Side. I was invited by a guy named all the technology and whatnot that was going on during the 1990s. I think it was back that far. And in the process, I met Mark in Gettysburg, and at the time, he was pretty skeptical, as I remember. And he certainly had written all the Gettysburg, or Ghosts of Gettysburg books, but wasn't so sure about some of the investigation. So he was a great character to put into the book. And it helped me to be able to apply some of the things I was learning by having Mark. He and I would go out onto the battlefield and try out some of the equipment and see what we could get. And then we put various items into the house where his office was, and had, looked at the results from all of that. So that's how we actually met, was my coming to Gettysburg to learn the stuff. And I was writing the book, Ghosts Investigating the Other Side, at the time.
Wonderful. And Mark, you got in there, and I know Carol is always involved in the background and right by your side, and in so many of these investigations and things like that. What was your side of that? You thought that was just an interesting concept to come together? And
Well, yeah, at first it was just an interview.
mm-hmm.
And then I started, and the interviews are usually pretty shallow.
Mm-hmm.
It's just small stuff. But Catherine has a way of asking questions and continually asking questions, diving really into a subject. And so that's where I kind of realized that she's the real thing. And that shows in her work. And I'm not saying that because she's listening in. I'm saying and that, of course, is why our friendship has lasted for so long, and that we're still hoping to work together on a couple of things. At least I hope she does. But at any rate, the professionalism, I think, I'm always impressed by professionalism. Catherine was really pro when she was asking questions and everything. And then to put a little in on Carol here, Carol and I have known each other for 40 years.
Wow.
I was a park ranger. She was a college student out there when we first met. Then she went off, got married, and got divorced. 20 years goes that quickly anymore.
Like a blink.
Yeah, and then we ended up getting back together again, and got married. Now we're getting close to 20 years. But at any rate, she was got a degree in biology, and at Gettysburg College, and was in computers and retail and things like that. But when we got married, she was not really. She was kind of into the ghost stuff, like everybody is, Mm-hmm. But then I found out when I got rid of my other publisher that she was pretty good in the publishing industry, that she had to learn, and also as an editor. So now she's my editor and my publisher. And you want to add anything? Because I'm sure I forgot something.
It's been a wild ride.
Isn't it though? And that's the excitement of the whole thing. And Katherine, I've been listening to some interviews of yours, and it's just absolutely fascinating. I can't say enough again, like I said in the beginning, the blogs on Psychology Today are in-depth and interesting. And my mods are dropping links. I specifically sent them links because if you're interested in any of this, the minds of a serial killer and breakdown of crime scenes, any of that, please check out that blog. It's fantastic. So you just keep busy. I mean, I've heard of, your trip across country when you were first starting out, and then riding back through. And the whole time I'm thinking that must have really gave you a lot of time to meet new people and study characteristics of human beings and things like that. And how adventurous you've been, and even spending time in the underground vampire world just to learn about things. You're hands-on, and that's what I assumed. You two had gotten together probably in Gettysburg on the battlefield, and then I heard the little story about Triangular Field. Would somebody like to tell a little bit about that one?
Well, I actually do want to return the compliment to Mark, because I've worked with a lot of frauds, and Mark and Carol always want to test things out. So I think that is, as Mark said, why we've lasted as long as we have, because we are hands-on. We like the immersion experience, including getting scared if that's what happens. But having adventures, we've traveled together, looking up haunted places, and stayed overnight in haunted places. So I have always enjoyed that Mark and Carol are willing to test things and not just put forth their ideas and then not be able to be questioned about them. Mark and I actually joke that we're kind of the Moby and Sculler team, for the X-Files, but I don't know if he wants to be Moldy and me Sculler or what. So we kind of joke about that, because I'm definitely much more of the skeptic. I approach it, with all the training in forensics and whatnot. But nevertheless, I think we make a good team, which is why we then proposed to write a book on paranormal forensics and then haunted crime scenes, because I think we do respect each other. And I'm going to let Mark tell the Triangular Field story.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, I had not really done any EVP. I'd heard about the electronic voice phenomenon that we all hear about. Just a quick explanation: it's recording voices that you can't hear. In other words, kind of weird, because you ask a question, a pertinent question, to whatever spirits might be in the vicinity, and then pause. And you're not supposed to hear. Well, you don't hear anything. If you hear anything, it's not electronic. It's not EVP. It's regular paranormal voices, or maybe people. But at any rate, we're out in the Triangular Field. It's nighttime, and if you've ever been there, which I know you have, Cisco, the Triangular Field it's right next to Devil's Den, so it's out in the middle of nowhere on the battlefield. I was very, very familiar with it. but still, because of my park ranger days, but still, it's kind of foreboding, and especially at night. So here it is in the middle of the night, and Catherine and I are out in the middle of this field, and she said, "Why don't you try some EVP?" I said, "Well, okay, why not?" And I had, in 35 Days to Gettysburg, I'd written about the Confederate assault through the triangular field, and I had a roster of the soldiers that fought there and were wounded there and were killed in the triangular field. And so I really didn't expect too much, but I asked a pertinent question about the soldiers that were there. And I stood there in silence, and I'm looking at my recorder, which is on voice activation, and all of a sudden the numbers start moving. It's recording something that I can't hear. And when I play it back, when I called out the roster of the soldiers, I kind of called them to attention and told them that it's time to get pay and that type of thing, which every soldier is going to show up for. And when I called out their names, you could hear voices in the background. I'd call out a name, and you'd hear, "Yes, sir," or "Here," or so often military answers to these questions. And so when I played it back, it was kind of a little bit shocking that I think that was the first time I'd ever gotten specific answers to a specific question from the soldiers. And that really was the beginning of my collecting EVP. And I have literally thousands of examples of EVP now. But that was one of those chills up the back of your spine.
I can imagine.
And Catherine was there, waiting for me to run and out of the triangular field, I'm sure.
Yes, yes. How did you? What was your vantage point of that whole thing, Catherine? How did you feel, and what did you go in with?
I think I had two different recorders. Wasn't that? I think that's what I had done was brought in recorders. I had different, two different hands getting stuff, and it was, as I recall, like a twilightish. It was right atmospherically. It was kind of right before the sun was setting. It was cold out, so nobody was really around. So I was just there to record stuff, and I got definitely a voice as he's calling off these names. Said very, very loud, "Yes, sir."
Wow. Amazing. Now, I had heard in another interview where you said, Catherine, that I can't imagine you being afraid or apprehensive of anything after I've read, learned a little bit about you. And you had said something about like maybe Ghost was one of the last frontiers for you as far as being afraid. I can't believe anybody that could write the things about serial killers and human, monsters that you write about. And then Ghost was just another thing that you were learning about, because you were writing a book called Ghost, weren't you, when you met Mark?
I was writing Ghost, and I did grow up reading ghost stories, and I really did enjoy being scared by them.
Yeah.
And you can easily talk about, I'm not afraid of this until you're in a pitch black room, where the ghost gets into bed with you, supposedly.
Yes.
And everything you hear is that ghost creeping toward you, ready to, climb into bed. So that happens. And I actually like that. I was afraid that writing Ghost was going to make me less afraid. And that is what happened. I am less afraid. I'm now much more curious. But I don't think that it's an apparition. Now, I'm a ghost repellent, so that helps.
Well, I'll tell you, you can stand in a battlefield in Gettysburg or Fredericksburg or anything like that, and you can repel, so many, and there's still going to be a lot of. They're just everywhere. They're just everywhere.
Nothing. Yeah, things don't happen to me like that. So, and I've been told by various psychics and mediums that I have this entourage of victims and serial killer ghosts that other ghosts don't like. So But still,
Wow.
if they're talking to me, I can't hear them. They're not pushing me downstairs or pinching me or anything like that, as I wish they were.
Well, that's amazing because most of the people I talk to say, that they don't want to know, like they won't investigate in their own home because if there's something there, they don't want to know about it. They're fine there. They'll go other places to visit, but they don't want to have them around them, in their home. So,
Well, I
that's a
do.
good
They can come here. I'll throw the party here,
You
definitely.
set up a camera and a recorder and let's see what happens,
Yeah,
because
one of my favorite movies is Truly Madly Deeply, where her boyfriend dies and then he brings
oh,
his ghost to sit and watch movies. I think that would just be the most amazing, wonderful life. I'd love it.
oh my goodness. Well, I'll tell you, I thought I'd seen them all, but I watched one the other day with Mira Sorvino called The Presence. And I thought I'd seen all the ghost movies that got it right, but boy, that one was a good one.
Hmm.
It had, how the ghosts interact around you and you don't know. So check it out. It's free on YouTube, The Presence. That might be a nice one for Halloween. Now, you guys got together and wrote two books that I know of so far. I don't know if another is in the works, but I have one of them here, Haunted Crime Scenes. Absolutely fantastic. Highly recommend it. And it was Blood and Ghosts, correct? Is the other?
Right.
Now, in those, how did you manage to do? What was the process? Did you go on some together and investigate a crime scene that also had a haunting involved? Is that how it went?
Yeah, that's it. And I think Catherine was the one who had the idea for the whole thing because when she started getting into ghosts and writing the book and getting involved in paranormal investigating, and of course she's always been an expert on forensics. All of a sudden, she realized that a lot of the same techniques used in solving crimes were being used to gather information in the paranormal field.
Mm.
Okay, and the same biases were showing up, and so the same care had to be taken, or should be taken, when you're doing a paranormal investigation as when you're doing a forensic investigation, a crime scene investigation. And her thought was, every once in a while they'll pull in a psychic to help with not necessarily solving the crime, but continuing the investigation, the crime. And she thought it'd be a great idea, since there are paranormal groups out there that investigate scenes of death and murder. That would be the ideal situation. You'd have every person having a specific strong suit, some who are good at using dowsing rods and pendulums, others with EVP, others with photography, and so on. And that would be your PFI, your paranormal forensic investigation team. And the more we got into it, the more, she supplied the crime scenes basically, and then I would supply the okay. If we were trying to keep this, if it was a dead end case, it was a cold case, how would you get it started again? Obviously, trying to contact some of the victims,
Okay.
some of the dead witnesses, because many of these crimes people have passed, all of them, everybody involved, and or trying some other techniques like remote viewing. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Catherine has been an advocate of psychological autopsies. In other words, trying to find out about the person's psychological state at the time that they died. And of course, if you would be able to talk to them or maybe go to where they were when they were killed, that certainly would help. And of course, remote viewing does that. It takes the person to the site. It's nothing new. It's been done for probably 70 years. I think was going on shortly after World War II. The government was funding it, and so it's not called Operation Stargate.
Mm-hmm.
And several books have been written about it. McMonagle wrote one. Price wrote one about their experiences. We're real people. And we've used it in a couple of our haunted crime scenes investigations and mysterious journeys weekends. So it's a viable thing to do. Psychometry is another thing that you could use. If you could get your hands on the murder weapon, or perhaps be at the murder site, touch the walls. If if this was your forte, then that's certainly you could produce some more information. Not necessarily to solve the crime. Everybody, we sort of pitched this to Hollywood, and the last thing they said was, "Well, yeah, that's great. So the ghosts are going to solve the crime," and we all got real quiet. It was like, no, doesn't happen that way.
Right.
What the ghosts will do is give you some more information to continue the investigation. And as a matter of fact, we asked Greg McCrary, who is a former FBI profiler and helped us on these books. I flat out asked him, I said, Greg, if someone came to you and they said, I have some information I got, using paranormal means, would you follow that lead? He said, absolutely. We'll do anything to solve a crime. And so now it's not necessarily admissible in court because it's still considered spectral evidence, which goes all the way back to our wonderful ancestors at the Salem witch trials. That was left such a bad taste in everybody's mouths that you can't do that. So it can't be introduced in in court, but it certainly can be used by the investigators, the law enforcement investigators, to continue the investigation.
Wonderful. Catherine, do you have anything to add to that you'd like to, from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the first book that we wrote together, Blood and Ghosts, really starts out with the exactly how it all works. A couple of brothers had remembered their grandfather telling a ghost story about a certain area outside of Philadelphia called Duffy's Cut. And the story was that these railroad workers had all gotten cholera and died, and there were mass graves out there. But they thought that was kind of odd, and the records had been kept secret, and they thought that was kind of odd. So they start digging, and they find a human bone and then a human skull, and the skull appears to have been shot with a bullet was shot through it. So they thought that was weird. They enlisted an anthropologist, an archaeologist, a geologist to start really doing an official exhumation, and they found remains of about 5 people. And it was evident that these people had not actually died from cholera. Maybe some had, but not all 57 of them had died from cholera. That it was more likely the reason it was kept secret is because the people around the area were so scared of this illness that they came in and massacred the workers. And that's what was in the mass graves, are people who had been murdered, not people who had died from cholera. So there's a crime scene, and that all started with a ghost story.
Amazing. And what was your vantage point on all this, Carol? I mean, you thought this was great? Because I know a little story that Mark told me several years ago, and we were talking on another interview, and it was about a historic place there in a home, I believe, in Gettysburg, where some liquid showed up. Now, this was one of the first times I'd heard, other than Dan Aykroyd following in his father's footsteps and saying, I want to get a hold of some ghost DNA so I can prove they exist. I never heard anything else about it till I spoke to Mark. Would you share a little bit of that story and how Carol was involved in everything? And I don't know, Catherine, you might have been involved in this one too.
I brought a dog handler into that one, so yes.
Great.
I forgot about that.
Well, the place is called the Daniel Lady Farm, and it was part of the battlefield, not purchased by the National Park Service. So it was in private hands until the 1990s when an organization I was on the board of directors of, the Gettysburg Battlefield Preservation Association, purchased it from the owners, and they began to renovate the whole thing. And when they did, they tore up the carpeting, and they found blood stains in the front room on the wooden floor that had been there for 150 years. And so they preserved those and started doing tours of the house. And a number of years later, after they had restored the house, I got a phone call from the caretaker out there, and he said, "Mark, if you want to see a paranormal event going on before your very eyes, come on out.
Come on down."
Well, how could I pass that up?
Right.
So I put all the stuff in the van, drove out there. I'm not sure. Were you with me the first time?
No,
Okay.
I went out the second.
That's right, and I'm glad you did. And so at any rate, I went out there, and I was videotaping everything as soon as I walked in the door, because I didn't know what was going to happen.
Right.
And he said to me, we had cleaned this place all up. It was absolutely spotless, and because we had some people come in. And then this morning when I came in, I found this, and he opened the door to the front room, which was the operating room. And I walked in, and I had my video camera going, and I looked down on the floor, and there were 3 or 4 long streams of liquid, a rust-colored liquid. There was like a clear serum or something coming out the side, and there were spots that seemed to be crystallizing, droplets of this brownish liquid. I immediately looked up to the ceiling, thinking that there had been a break in rusty pipes, and it was all whitewashed. It was clear and clean, and I'm like, "Did any pipes break in the basement?" He says, "No, this just appeared." Mm-hmm. So I said, "Oh my goodness! All right, well," and I was there for about 20, 25 minutes. I took stills. I put a yardstick down next to him, and I took photos. Did kind of a really as good of an investigation as I could. And I asked him, "Do you have any tissue?" And he said, "Yeah." So I got a couple of tissues, and I dipped them in the liquid. And I said, I don't know. That's all I can do. He says, "Well, I got to get out to the fields. I got a lot of work to do out there." He said, "I don't know what I'm going to do about this." I said, "Well, I don't either." So I jumped in the van and went back home, and all of a sudden, 2-3 hours later, I got another phone call from him, and he said, "Mark, it's gone." I said, "What?" He said, "It's vanished. It's disappeared." I said, "I'll be right out." Carol came with me that time. So I walked in once again with the video camera going, and of course it's got the date and time stamp on it, so you can see it's 3.5, 4 hours later. Walked in, and it was gone. It was completely gone. And I'm like, what happened? He said, "I don't know. It was right here." And you see him in the video kind of squatting down. And he said, "It was right there, wasn't it?" I said, and he's running his hands across where it was. I said, "Yeah." But I guess he was trying to feel if it was still wet. He said, "What the heck?" He lifted up his hand, and on his fingertips was just a thin layer of dust.
Oh, my.
And I'm like, "What in the world?" And Carol says, "I wonder if the samples are still, if you still have the samples."
No, actually, what I said was, "Where's the Kleenex that you dipped?"
Good for you, Carol.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I
And
said,
he said, "It's in the car." I said, "I'm going to go get it." Because in my mind, I was thinking, what if the blood's gone? What if it's not on the
Kleenex? Oh, yeah. Right.
So we brought it in, and it was still on the Kleenex.
yeah, it was still there. And so the GBPA is pretty well connected. There are a lot of lawyers in it and everything. So I handed one of the Kleenexes over to them, and they sent it off to a forensics lab. It was tested, and 3 weeks later, they got the results back. The liquid was blood. The species was human.
Incredible.
And it had disappeared. And yet you could still see, I mean, once blood gets on that floor, the other blood stayed there for 150 years. What happened to that blood?
Yeah.
I don't know either.
And the dust where nothing could be.
It was like I was in a time warp. Like everything went backwards for a little while. And
But then when we brought a cadaver dog into the house, the dog went right to those spots.
Wow.
yeah.
And you had, Catherine, didn't you give Mark the chemical that detects blood?
The luminol.
Luminol?
Yeah, the luminol. And so she gave Mark some of that, and he took that in, and it also showed up under the special light as blood.
Now, did anybody dig? And well, there's so much. Was that you said that was used at a hospital? So many people in and out. So, and no EVPs or any investigation on that could tell you a little bit about where that might have come from or who wanted to be heard. Because we often think that they seem to push it, manifest in some way or another for attention or something like that. It's another theory that's out there. Do you think that was something going on, or was just a replay in time? I mean, that's incredible.
I think it was just a replay in time. I don't think there's a whole lot more you can do in terms of finding out whose blood that was, mainly because there were so many men operated on. I mean, you had 51,000 casualties during the Battle of Gettysburg, and several thousand were operated upon in that vicinity. So your guess is as good as mine whose it is, or why it showed up, and why it disappeared, or why I was sent into some kind of weird time warp to witness this thing, and then everything's back to normal again. I don't know. That is one of the things in my life that I'm really nonplussed about. I have no idea what happened.
Right.
It
The
actually
bullseye.
kind of reminds me of a story that's in the book where this guy who used to have this house out in California for all kinds of horror movie paraphernalia. Forrest J. Ackerman was his name. Did all the comic books and whatnot. And he said, if after I die, I'm going to make it clear that my spirit is still around. And he had a friend who was a chemist. I think his name was John Allison. And there was a piece of paper with the Ackerman name on it. And he walked out of the room and he came back in, and it seemed as if some water had gotten onto the paper that obliterated Ackerman's name, but there was no source at all for where this water could have come from. And so because he's a chemist, he tested the paper with all kinds of things. He took it to his chemical society to ask other people, and they never could figure out where the source of this water was that had obliterated the name. And it seemed as if Ackerman had found a way to show his friend, I'm still around.
Wow. Isn't that wonderful? Now, do you guys find in any of these cases that you've studied or written about, has there been any cases that combined together, either one of you or together, feel that you've come closer to a close for the cases, even though they wouldn't hold up in court and you can't, at this point do a lot with it? Is there any cases that you feel like you've come a little bit closer to the answers, either through communication with the victims or, as you said earlier, maybe, certain objects with psychometry or anything like that? Any of you?
Hotel Bethlehem.
Please tell.
So in the Hotel Bethlehem, there was a man who supposedly committed suicide during the 1980s. He had been involved with Bethlehem Steel. He had a partnership with some other attorneys, and they had a suicide clause in the contract to make sure that, if that had happened, the others would get a payout. But this guy supposedly committed suicide just before the suicide clause ran out, meaning no one's getting anything. Smith was his last name. So I know the coroner for that county, and it was his mentor, the prior coroner, who had investigated the case. So he had the records. And so we knew that there were ghost sightings in this hotel near and in this particular room. At the time, it was a room. Now it's kind of a conference room. There was a restroom or bathroom that the guy used as I think a copy machine and whatnot was in there. And so because his body was up against the door when they found him, they just decided it had to be suicide. There was no other way to think about it, because nobody else could have been in there with him. But we decided that wasn't necessarily true. And so we came to the hotel and went into this small room and we had a mannequin up against the door to see how it was going to work. And could somebody have killed him? Because he was shot twice. So could somebody have killed him and slid out? And it turned out that, in fact, that could have happened. So he could have certainly been assassinated by somebody from, some organized crime kind of thing, and left slumped against the door so that it would appear to be suicide. And so we went in and did some things, and I'll let Mark tell the tale on that one. But it did get the coroner to reopen the file, and when we looked into it, he thought maybe this should not have been called a suicide. But so go ahead, Mark. What did we do in the room?
Well, one of the things I did is I tried to get some EVP in there, and I asked several questions, and I didn't get a whole lot, except when I said, how did you die? And very faintly you can hear two syllables, and they both end in ER, meaning murder, rather than suicide. It sounded like it could be interpreted as murder. So that was the thing that kind of, I put a lot of faith in EVP if it's correctly interpreted, and if it's done correctly too. And that was the thing that really kind of swung me, because when we first started studying this thing, I was open-minded, but I wasn't really sure. But at any rate, that kind of turned my head around on that.
Yeah, and then when we opened the file, we discovered that 3 weeks prior, someone had shot into his house.
Oh.
So that, and his wife also said there's no chance he would have killed himself and left us without money. There's no chance that, and she was trying to get the files reopened, but for some reason that we were not able to discover, it was sealed in the federal court. So we were not able to go get the rest of the files. But she had tried to do that, because she said she contested the finding of suicide, and now the coroner I work with had to agree with that maybe they had not done a proper investigation as they should have, because it could have been that someone was in the bathroom with him, shot him, and slipped out. We showed that just by doing the forensic work and reconstruction. Then we got the EVP that suggested there was more to the story, and this ghost shows up. They've seen him like a maid saw him in the mirror. He shows up on the, wandering on the floor. So why is he so restless? What's going on with that? So that's, I think, a good story where we brought forensic reconstruction, the prior death investigation, a coroner who could look at it again, and then the ghostly activity as well. Brought it all together in one case.
Well, and I think we also had the opportunity, didn't we, to interview the security guard?
Yes.
That had discovered the body.
Right.
Yeah, so he reconstructed for us what that night was like, because there was it was a big night, and definitely on that night they had fireworks and
Yeah, and the guy shot himself right during the fireworks.
yeah.
And so
Yeah.
a good way to mask a gunshot is do it during fireworks.
Right. That is truly amazing. So, just getting involved like that. Now, I've heard of another one. I don't know if anything like this has happened to you guys, but a medium friend of mine, she's pretty famous, but I won't say her name now because I haven't got permission for the story, but basically came down where she actually sees the dead come to her. And they come in their death state. So basically, it's not pleasant for anybody, including the dead. And this one persistent victim kept coming to her until she had just dropped her kids off to school. And it was horrifying for her to look in the rearview mirror and see this young girl who was a victim sitting in her back seat. She pulls over the side of the road. I can't imagine this, but she does. And she finally just tell me. Just, okay, let's do this. We're doing it right now. If you want to tell me, tell me. She kept saying evidence. There's evidence locked up still in the police headquarters. And she described it. She said there's a box, a Marlboro cigarette box. There's evidence in that cigarette box. And she kept on until finally this medium had some police investigation in the past, where she had helped out. And she went to the people that she knew in there, and the officers listened to her. And of course, they had to kind of fudge the paperwork. How'd you find out about this? And he kind of fudged it a little bit to say, well, I wanted to go over cold cases and evidence. The Marlboro red box was in there, and in there was a half-smoked pill. Another gentleman, I use the term loosely, kidnapped her from a car wash and tortured and raped her on the road and highway and decapitated her and threw her in a ditch. Mm. The reason it turns out, according to the medium, that she was so persistent is because he was free and about to do it again. So you wonder, that's why I also asked about, different things like persistent paranormal things like ghosts trying to get that attention. They want something to be known, and maybe they don't quite know how to do it. And the only thing they know how to do is bang a cabinet or, on the door, or just materialize in some way or another just to show somebody listen. And in that case right there, where was he not shot in the leg and some weird spots for a suicide, wasn't it?
In the stomach. Yeah, in the leg and the stomach, yeah. And we do have suicides that can shoot themselves twice and even more times, but it's rare, and so you have to always wonder about it. He certainly could have shot himself in the leg by accident and then shot himself in the stomach, but most people know that shooting yourself in the stomach is not a quick way to die. That's not a very good way to commit suicide. So, I think it was very questionable.
Mm. It sounds like it. Now, in both of the books, they were both handled similarly as far as we said in cases where back and forth. Were there any or some that both of you were able to be on scene for the investigation other than you? Were you both at the Hotel Bethlehem?
Yes.
Okay, all of you. Were there others too that you got evidence like this, or like I said, EVP, or got to speak to converse with a victim that might have pointed toward evidence like the story I told or something along those lines?
Danny Hansford.
Yeah,
that's what it just said, Carol. Yeah.
Yep.
Speaking of the ghost, that was like playing with your mind
for years.
Yeah, for years. Yeah.
Yeah.
The famous movie and book, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, about Savannah. And about Jim Williams, who was the restorer of buildings and antique dealer who got involved with Danny Hansford and ended up killing him. We were down there, and we did a lot of investigating. We visited Danny's grave together and singularly probably 4 or 5 times. And every time we did, we got a different different answer, like he was kind of playing with us a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't you guys do some investigating down at the Buzzard House?
We went to the Buzzard House, and definitely got a lot of information from going there. So I mean, you're asking if there's one that we were all together. I had gone down earlier to do some stuff for the court TV. We're doing haunted crime scenes, which is before we actually ever wrote this book. But that was already kind of a setup. And so then when we went down together, we had an idea of what we wanted to do to investigate what the story really was. And, there's always been a lot of question about Jim Williams's version of events. And now we've actually seen an attorney put a book out with a lot of the crime scene photos that show it was clearly staged. So Jim Williams is a liar, no doubt about it. But what is Danny trying to tell us? What does he want us to do? He seems to be leading us into something. We just, at this time, don't know what.
So it's just an ongoing of, a little bit at a time, maybe later on down the line. From one thing that I've learned, there's not many questions that can be answered in this field. It's all theories and spitballing, really, because the bullseye keeps moving. You normally wind up with more questions than answers, and which is why this is so intriguing, because you guys really are looking at it from two perspectives. I mean, reading the stories, like just say in the Haunted Crime Scene book, I went, jumped around and then started again, but I landed on Jack the Ripper. Because with that one, there's so many things tossed up. You've got Patricia Cromwell, bless her heart, spent so much money, and she's convinced this has happened, and so many, people that are into that. Everybody has their favorite. But Katherine, you were there. You've walked it. And I was reading that you said, too, that you believe that two murders could be done by two different people in one night. And, this looked a little different, or that feels different. With your minds in that case, what did the three of you come away from when you wrote that chapter and talked about the apparitions? You've got apparitions of the victims, possibly the victims being seen in those areas and things like that. What went on with that case for the three of you?
Well, there are well over 300 suspects for that, and multiple disagreements over how many actual victims there are, including that maybe the 5 official victims aren't actually Jack the Ripper victims. There are theories that there is no Jack the Ripper, it's Jill, or it's Jack and Jill, or a group of people. There's so many different theories about it, and the real problem with going there to do any kind of investigation at this point is most of the scenes have been obliterated by new construction and renovations and stuff. The last time I was there, about 3 years ago, most I could see most of it was going to be gone soon, and that's too bad. There's still a pub that one of the victims was seen in right before she was killed, and there's a few back alleys, but they're quickly going to be lost. So it is difficult to try to do some kind of investigation in Whitechapel, and even you'd still have to get some agreement on who the victims actually are. Are there more than 5, less than 5? Who knows? It's a difficult case because of how it was investigated back in 1888.
As in
I
most.
think we really wrote that because we wanted to do European haunted crime scenes, and then the pandemic.
Yes, absolutely.
There.
Yes, the pandemic even affect the paranormal. That's for absolutely sure, for true. Mark and Carol, how did you look into that? Everybody's got a different vantage point of that. I mean, I can't imagine as to get in the mind of a forensic analyst and trying to decide whether all of them were done at the same, or was it the royals, was it the prostitute that might have been pregnant that, and she told, and there's so many different stories. Even H.H. Holmes, I think, was brought into it, and the possibility of Jack the Ripper coming over to America and starting off there and, off again. So many things. And of course, crime scenes were not handled well at any rate, and still in some cases they probably still aren't. But how did you feel about that, Mark, looking at the Jack the Ripper case?
Well, I don't think that all the notoriety that it has, I don't think that and all the ghost stories that are involved with, I don't think that there's been a whole lot, at least that I know of actual paranormal forensic investigation on it. I don't know if any, there may have been some attempts at EVP, but I don't know about remote viewing into the past, into the crime scene. I don't think there's been any of that done. I don't think there's been a whole lot of, I'm sure there hasn't been a whole lot of psychometry, because I guess the letters are pretty well sealed up. I don't think you can get your hands on those.
No, we don't actually know that Jack the Ripper wrote any letter at all.
Well, that's another
That's
thing.
all speculation that any letter came from Jack the Ripper.
Right. And so that's another thing. I'm always interested when something comes on TV about it, but Katherine has studied it way more than I have. Carol, do you have any thoughts on?
No, I've always looked at it from just the curiosity.
Right.
I will tell you that if you look at the cover of Haunted Crime Scenes, that is Catherine's photograph of one of the alleys from when she toured the Jack the Ripper.
Right.
So
there you go, right there. It's a wonderful cover, absolutely wonderful cover. I was watching a ghost walk of Whitechapel today, and they took you down and showed you the little alleys that look just like that, and they said that they think that they were the inspiration for the Harry Potter and stuff like that. I can imagine their inspiration for a lot of things, but the Jack the Ripper case has always been an inspiration for conversation and speculation, and I can't imagine looking at those crime scene photos and trying to figure out this guy was an absolute butcher, and then you've got everything else from, well, it was an actual butcher, because they did a lot of medical stuff, light medical things back then. Everything was so different. But to be able to do that kind of stuff in that amount of time, I don't know where they get their timelines from. I'm sure it's in, a lot of the paperwork, and somebody studied it more than I. But it seems like it was done so quickly and in not great conditions, too. How could he get away with doing so much in such a short amount of time?
Well, actually, the only if you really get into it, the only victim that applies to is Catherine Eddowes.
Okay.
And the others were pretty quick, except for the fifth one that was done inside, and so that was done in private, and it's estimated he or she was probably in there for about 2 hours.
Oh my goodness!
So, because it was inside.
Right, Mary Kelly, I believe.
It was really the Eddowes murder that. Where he really eviscerated her, but the police beat was very almost military timing. So he had to have known exactly when they were passing by that particular spot. That means he was clever. He was very predatory, and he knew where he could run away and hide. But really, that's the only one of the victims that really was a close call in that way.
Mm. Interesting, and I think that's one of the reasons we're still intrigued by it, because it was one of the most famous early serial killers, and I think that whole thing, Katherine, you know about that, how many people are fascinated with serial killers and, these mass murders and what's going on in their mind. You've written so many books on it and, based a career on it. But is what draws us to this kind of thing? Is it, like you said about ghosts, they kind of scared me a little and that kind of intrigued me? Is that what draws us to these kind of stories, not just paranormal and ghost stories, but the real human kind of monsters too? Is that what does it? It's the, I want to be scared, but I don't want to be in any kind of danger kind of thing?
Well, I think the narrative gives us a safe frame especially cases that have been adjudicated and are over. We're interested in them, and we like the titillation, but we also like to know that we can be safe. Like with ghost stories, you can turn on the light, you can put the book down, you can get out of the room. I think we like being scared as long as we know we're not going to be terrified by absolute helplessness to some monstrous force. But we do enjoy the whole mystique of the dark and what could be in there that we don't understand. And I think that's part of it. But Mark and Carol, maybe you have your own theories on that.
Well, it's definitely an adrenaline rush when you're standing there in the darkened basement of the Cashtown Inn, and you get 3 taps on your shoulder, and it happens 2 more times after that. So, yeah, but it's a little difficult. At least I'm fascinated by it. I don't get scared to the point where, I don't want to analyze it anymore. I'm still analyzing. I'm still trying to figure out, okay, what exactly happened. And when you analyze it enough and you realize, nothing normal just happened, then you're left with the paranormal, explanation. And then you still have a lot of examination to do on that as well. I don't know, Carol's the one who is kind of like the one with the scientific mind in this whole thing, having been
excuse me.
Yeah, well,
You're the super scientific. I'm the one in the middle. I'm the one that takes Catherine's information and Mark's information and tries to figure out how to blend them into something logical.
Absolutely wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful mix. The books are fascinating. The conversations are fascinating, and I think the subject is just off the charts fascinating. I think this is a great new way of looking at things. Is there any cases, we're running down and we've got like 4 minutes left, and I promised I'd keep it short for you guys, but is there any cases that intrigued you so much you just and didn't quite get enough of that you want to go back and look at again for each of you? And that'll probably take us out once all of my mods are putting in all of your links. The books again are Haunted Crime Scenes, Blood and Ghosts, and multiple other books and genres for both authors. And what do you think? Is there a case you'd like to go back and look at, Carol? Let's go with you first.
I think a general comment I'd like to make is that the dead don't scare me anymore. It's the living that terrify me.
I agree. So agree.
And the last case that we really got into was the Danny Hansford and the Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. And I think that's one I still find really interesting. We found so much new information on it when we did our Haunted Crime Scenes weekend, both paranormally and forensically with Catherine. And there's still pieces of it. Danny promised to come back and give us more, and we have not sat down and done that with him.
Okay.
So there's still more, I think, hanging on that one that is very pertinent to things that are happening today. And I don't know, that one just really has intrigued me for a very long time.
I think the case that bugs me the most is the Babes in the Woods, which is a local, and just north of Gettysburg. 3 young girls were found dead in the woods. And they traced it, and they found out that they came from California with their father and his perhaps paramour and his niece, and they ended up in just left there in the dead in the woods. And the reason it bugs me so much is because we got EVP from the girls, all 3 distinct personalities, lovely little girls. One was ebullient about things, and all of a sudden they shut up. Patty Wilson, who was our medium, said, "He's here now. Their father is here now," and he made them shut up. So that continually will bug me for a long time.
I can imagine. I've often wondered that, if you're talking to the victims, if the killer or somebody that had strength over them could come in and make them be quiet, don't talk about that, or I've heard that in other cases. He's here, I can't talk, or here he comes, I gotta go,
It
kind of
happened.
thing. That's terrible. So yeah, definitely. If you could get back and see if you could get more on that. How about you, Catherine? Any that you'd like to go back and look at again or continue on with?
Well, I think any cold case, really has potential for being solved in this combined manner, especially with new things happening. Things like the genealogical DNA analysis. You can go back and identify victims that you couldn't do before. But we do this haunted crime scenes weekend where we do look at cold cases. So I think any of the cases we've chosen, Danny Hansford was one, the minister and the choir singer from New Brunswick who were murdered in Lover's Lane is another good one. Jack the Ripper is always a good one for me. I could talk about that for hours, obviously. But for me, it's really any case that's itching to be solved, and there are ways to still get at it, and in particular, using this combined methodology that we've come up with.
I think it's absolutely brilliant. Like I said, the first I'd heard of it when, with the blood and, on the floor, and Carol going, "Where's the tissue with the blood?" So thank you, Carol, for that, because that started a whole train of things. It's intrigued me. I've talked about it many times on this show. I think it's a wonderful thing. You guys are so busy and doing so many wonderful things. You talk about these haunted crime scene weekends now. Is that something that you put out on your website? Can other people join, or is that just something you do together and then put it out there? What's that about?
That is a full weekend event with attendees. Our next one is April 8th to the 10th.
Nice.
I have not put it out. I'll have to look and see if I put it out on the website yet. We usually offer it first to previous attendees, so they get first option to sign up. So I'll probably, if I haven't posted it, I'll probably post it at the end of October.
Sounds wonderful. And Catherine, again, thank you so much for taking time from your travels to spend some time with us. I'd love to have you guys back and talk about a couple of cases in depth if you'd like. My chat is always, they're absolutely thrilled. It's rolling like crazy here. They're putting up all of your links and everything else, so everybody's going to be hitting everything. But the books, where's the best place to find the books? I know that you guys have them there in your shop. Catherine, where's the best ones to find yours?
Well, two of mine are Mark's.
Yes.
That's helpful.
Yes.
I guess you could just find most of mine online, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, but certainly a number of them are in their shop as well and through their website.
Fantastic. And I want everybody to know, too, that Mark and Carol have been working on a fantastic app. I saw it live working there at the Gettysburg Bash when I got to hug the both of you, which was wonderful. And I think it's fascinating. And can you tell us a little bit about that real quick before I let you go? Because I think it's great.
This is Carol's.
Go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, it's a ghost tour of the battlefield. Mark and I had recorded it years and years ago back on the good old tape. And then we had it on a DVD, and then we had the opportunity to do an actual app that's both Android and iOS. But it takes you through the battle. It's about a 3.5 hour total tour. But what I really like about it is you can do it at home. You don't have to be in Gettysburg to take advantage of it. If you're in Gettysburg, you can drive it, and it will use the GPS and click through and give you. Mark does all the narration for the stories, the history and the stories. So it's the typical format of his books. But if you're at home and there's a particular area, like you want to hear the stories of Devil's Den, then you can just find that on the map, tap on the number, and it will give you the stories. So it's really fun. It's a fun tour.
Absolutely fantastic. You guys are just groundbreaking and all this stuff. And just when you think that you've heard all the ghost stories and all the things of the paranormal and you're done, spending an hour with you guys is better than watching a whole season of some of these shows on TV. I'll tell you that right now. I highly recommend the books. Please look into these guests tonight, chat listeners, because I'm telling you, I've been immersed in it for weeks and I'm about ready to dive in again. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else you'd like to say to listeners before I let you get back to your busy stuff?
Just thanks for seeing us and listening.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
Outstanding. And thank you guys so much. I'm going to let you go. Thank you again. I hope to be in Gettysburg in about 2 weeks and come and give you another hug. Going to the Hoover House in Antietam and Gettysburg again. Can't get enough of the Civil War stuff. Catherine, I hope to meet you in person one day. You are truly all just, role models for go out and just get it done. If you have an idea, give it a whirl. And I thank you guys so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Cisco.
Thanks, Cisco.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Stay spooky. Hi guys, I'm back. Don't go away. I just had to let them go and I had to do that cut part. I wanted to say hi to everybody here. Can you guys hear me 5-5? My mic looked like it was doing a little funky stuff there. Are you guys still there? I am so sorry. I wanted to apologize to my wonderful mods and my wonderful chat. I really had to focus tonight. There were so many different ways this could go. And it's wonderful to have people on with different, backgrounds. But to have a doctor of forensic psychology, written over 90 books, guarantee there's over 90, Dr. Ramsland, she writes for a blog for Psychology Today. She's written over 1,000 papers on forensics and the inside the serial killer's mind, and she did the whole thing on the BTK and just so many different things. And I wanted to give this hour because if I'm distracted and I'm looking over here, and I wanted to get some of your questions in, but I had promised the only way she could come in tonight, she's traveling, was to give her 1 hour and done. Mark and Carol would have stayed on here and just talked for, just had a ball with us and had, stayed on for a couple hours. But I just wanted to do that, and I wanted to come in and just apologize to my lovely chat, because usually we are back and forth in it and I'm putting questions up, and I didn't want to feel like I was dissing you guys, and I just really wanted to smoke a cigarette with you and say how you doing, because I don't do that to my guests that are new out of respect. It's not that I don't respect you guys, but we're kind of family here, so I can just chill and I can drink my tea and we can chit chat and talk. So I wanted to tell you a little bit more about this because I wanted to see from their vantage point what was really interesting to them, what intrigued them. The Bethlehem Hotel Bethlehem ghost that they were talking about. Keep in mind, this guy was found shot twice, leaning against the door, like she was saying. And she had to go in there and forensically try to figure out, could somebody have gotten out the window? Or did y'all ever hear that mysterious story about like the corpse that was found in the locked room? I think it may very well be a Hitchcock or something along those lines. But you have to try to figure out how they did it. How, if he didn't kill himself, how did it happen? They're doing this all the time. And it's so intriguing to me to think that Mark gets an EVP that had 2 syllables. The first one was he couldn't tell, but the last was murder. How did you die? Murder. But the first part, he said it twice. That is amazing to me. And I've heard them talk on another interview where they were talking about, well, has there ever been any ghost cases court cases that evidence was basically brought forth from a ghost? Yes, there have been. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that one. I can't remember what show it was. But it was a woman who was sleeping in bed. They were in an apartment, her and her husband, and the wall that separated the apartments on the other side was a bedroom too. Now there was this young lady who lived in that apartment before they were there, and it called in a TV repairman to fix her television. This is back in the day when your television was like a Zenith and had tubes and all that kind of stuff, and repairman came to your house, right? Well, he wound up killing her with a screwdriver. Okay, and put a mattress on top of her, tried to burn the mattress to hide the body. Okay, well, here's this woman who never met this young girl who lived next door. Her ghost was lingering. The woman didn't know that she had abilities as a trance medium, a channeler. And she's talking in her sleep and telling this story about what happened. And she's talking like the woman. And her husband's like, what's going on? What's going on? And it keeps happening night after night after night after night. And finally, they get out the information. And yes, that wound up in court. And they caught the murderer. So I don't know, in a lot of cases, I think there's a lot more than we know about. And they just slipped it in, like the story I told about the pack of Marlboro Reds, right? And that was my friend was... Can you imagine? You're doing your dishes, and you turn around, and there's just some dead man standing behind you in full view, full color, Technicolor, and they're in their death state, so obviously they're in, a horrible physical vision to see to begin with. That's startling enough. And they just persist to the point where they can try to understand how to communicate, whether it's, telepathically or showing, symbols or whatever they've got a way to communicate until you do something about it. If you talk to a lot of these psychics, and there's a lot of them that were famous back in, like say Sightings days or Unsolved Mysteries, you saw a lot of that where, the psychic, was working with the police detectives, and, they're driving in the car, and she says, stop here, and they get out and they walk, and, we've all seen those shows. She's really done it. And I'll tell you the divine says that's happened to you before, and it is chilling. Yeah. It's, you can imagine you just dropped your kids off from school. You drive along, you look in your rearview mirror to back up, and there's a dead person sitting in your back seat, and it's got something to say, but can't figure out how to say it yet. They're working on it, maybe. They're trying to show you different things, and it's in spurts. I don't know how many times on this show we've talked about, why doesn't the ghost just show up and say, yada, 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 this is what happened, this is how it happened, and, this is what I want you to do about it, or I'm not going to leave you alone. And it never happens that way. It's always in spurts and little bursts of energy, and, maybe 1 or 2 words. Every time I lean up, I've got like this thing on my forehead. That's just great. But, and my eyes get black. But anyway, I just thought it was a very intriguing subject. I really wanted to get them on. I had to take it the way I could get it. Carol Nesbitt, bless her heart, is the driving force behind Mark Nesbitt. And they're wonderful people. I know them personally. And, when I walked in the Gettysburg Bash, I could hear this, Cisco! I don't know, 15 tables back, it was Carol. And it's right up. It was so good to hug people again. You all know what I'm talking about, getting in groups and just, being able to show that kind of love. But wonderful people. If you get a chance to go to Gettysburg, go on the Candlelight Ghost Tours. It's run by Mark and Carol Nesbitt. They have a wonderful haunted little house there that they have right on, I think it's Baltimore Avenue. I could be wrong on that, but it's right Main Street. It's a wonderful ghost tour. It goes around the college. There's one that goes downtown. So you see the, I think they call him the Blue Boy of Gettysburg College. Saddest thing. And one of the first things Mark ever said to me was, before we met, when I first met him, I walked into his shop on Halloween night. It was probably 5:00 on Halloween, and it was 150th anniversary of the Gettysburg Battle. So there was quite a lot going on. It was an amazing time to be there. And I finally found a shop, and I had been reading his books for years and watching him on TV because he's been on so many things. And check him out, his YouTube channel. He's got many of his battlefield sessions there. You'll see Carol with her pendulum, and they're getting answers. And then they go back. Mark is very big on going back, studying the history, validating everything. Well, this guy says he's General so-and-so. Well, was General so-and-so on this battlefield? Let me tell you something. Mark's going to know it. I mean, this man has spent decades on this battlefield, and like I said, as a park ranger, not a park ranger, it's called something else, National Forest Service, it's just been... What a wonderful ride that the Nesbitts have been on, and their integrity, and the reason they do it, their heart and their intent. I don't know, we've talked a lot about that on this show, and I believe Katherine has that too. And what an interesting person, what an interesting life she's led to achieve the things she has across the board, and just a prolific writer. She says she gets up at 7:00 in the morning and starts writing. She's probably got 6 or 7 books going at one time, and she's just putting them out there. I mean, to spend 2 years immersed in the vampire subculture just to understand the science and the mind behind a vampire. She's also intrigued and a huge fan of Anne Rice. So she's wrote quite a few companion novels to go through with that, and you'll find those on her site. Excuse me. And also of Dean Koontz. So there it is. And I just, if you had any questions, I apologize. I was really trying to keep up, and I thought, gosh, I'm going to ask somebody had asked a question about I think they put it, what's the life expectancy on a ghost? Did somebody really say that? Because if not, that's an awesome question. I don't quite know how to answer that, but I don't know what other people have asked me that, and I don't have an answer. Some people will say, we only hear about ghosts that are from like 100 years ago. My personal... Oh, thank you, Danny Chow. That was good. Did you actually say what's the life expectancy of a ghost, or did I read that wrong, Donnie? I'm sorry. I may had, because it was going kind of fast, and the way the lights are and everything, I really have to pay attention, and then you don't quite hear everything that the person talking has said, and I didn't want to miss anything tonight, and therefore not do the best I possibly could for my chat and the listeners. So, it's an interesting question. Their expiration date. That's even better. I've heard this before. Now, from the mediums and channelers and psychics and investigators that work with them, and the reason I say it that way is because you really have to have somebody that is actually communicating with either the earthbound spirit or, one that's a visitation spirit, one that comes here and you might be talking to, you might see them, but they're not stuck. They're not earthbound, okay? Most of them tell me the same type of thing. No, there is no expiration date. Or the life expectancy of the energy of a ghost. I've had one that kind of, her theory was, gosh, I hope so. I hope to think that their angels, their spirit guides, their loved ones would eventually be able to get through and take them over, because none of us like to think that somebody could be stuck like that, and never move. So that's a nice thing to think. And I believe in a lot of cases that actually happens. But I also know several very good mediums. One I'm having on next week. What a treat that will be for y'all, I promise. Because I just love this man so much. His name is Rob Guttrow. And I will get him to tell you the story of when he went to England on his second to last vacation. And he bumped into a monk in one of the castles there that had been there going on 1,000 years. It was an intelligent haunting. He spoke to him. He had no problem communicating. He, in the short amount of time he had there, he was trying to talk to him and say, why are you still here? Or you're a religious man. You think, gosh, somebody that was that founded in religion to be a monk and working in, the church. I mean, he was in the church when he bumped into him in one of the rectories or whatever. And this is what the ghost told him. He was well aware that he was there. He was dead. And he chose to stay in this cage that he had basically built for himself because he could not forgive himself for being part of a murder that killed a friend of his. But he felt, and I didn't quite get the whole story from the monk, but he felt that he was the cause of this murder, or he had betrayed a friend. And he felt like he needed to go through this for his, karmic comeuppance, I guess. But it was self-imposed. And I know Rob, he said he had spent a little time talking to him, and said, well, you can go anytime. You're not stuck here. And he was perfectly fine with staying there. He's like, I don't feel like I'm done yet. So I wonder how many ghosts do that to themselves. We've talked before on this show about putting yourself in a cage and boxing in what your perception is. And I wanted to spend some time tonight. So there's your answer, Donnie. I would say, I don't know. I don't think there is. You would think after time that the energy would just dissipate, but then where does it go? If you didn't, want to cross over in that love light, in that energy source light, what do? Are you stuck in the in-between? Are you just and gone? You're somewhere. So I don't have the answer to that. I don't know that we ever will. I don't want to say that I want to get the answer because I know how the universe is and I don't want to wind up being a ghost and I'm like, okay, so this is it. And I got my answer, but now I'm stuck, so it makes me worry like that. But so I don't know. I think that's one of the oldest intelligent hauntings from someone with integrity that I trust. I don't know. And that remote viewing, what's crossing over anyway? Don't know. I just seem to have found out over the years where I'm at now. I am comfortable saying my theory that I'm comfortable with is I think crossing over is just a better place. Because if you don't, in my experience with earthbound spirits, they're not happy. They're not, they're reliving the feelings that they had here. Um, Very rarely ever bumped into a really happy ghost unless it was a child that was just running around because they didn't really know what to do with their consciousness, and they're just running around playing and doing the things that they would have done, and maybe pinching a leg or, moving something, and giggling and laughing and running off, or playing with other ghost kids or whatever that may be there, and not even know you exist because they're in their own world. But most of the ghosts that I've bumped into are struggling through something. Anger, can't forgive themselves. People say unfinished business, but I think that's kind of a kind of broad brush to paint. Most of them, in some cases, it seems to be, obviously the most I have come across in my travels is fear of leaving where they are and going to the next step because of things they have done in their life, because of people over there they don't want to see anymore. I had one ghost tell me, the reason I'm not crossing is because my wife's over there. I know she's over there. I had enough over while I was living. I sure don't want to spend the rest of my time with her when I'm dead. And we had to do 2 mediums to talk to this ghost to say, you don't have to do that. It won't be like that when you're over there. So it seems to me, to answer your question is, in my crappy attempt to hit this one, what's crossing over? It seems to go on to something better. The ghosts that I've seen here are still struggling with their earthly burdens. Does everybody agree with that? You're struggling with your earthly burdens, whether it be jealousy or rage or resentment or not forgiving yourself, or like that young girl who kept pestering the medium to go and tell the police officers there was evidence in your evidence lockup. How profound is that? There is evidence in the evidence lockup that had been there for almost 15 years. They didn't have DNA testing back then. They never even looked in the pack to see that there was a half-smoked cigarette. This killer would smoke his cigarette, put it out, and save the rest of the cigarette in his pack. And she knew it. And these son of a bitches rode up and down the highway and took turns driving while the other one was in the back seat, torturing this girl, cutting her, raping her, beating her. Pull over, switch, and take turns. They did this for over 200 miles, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until they decided they had had enough, dismembered her, cut her into pieces, and threw the pieces of her out the window like garbage. The reason she came back wasn't for revenge. The reason that she was stuck, it took her all that time to find somebody that had a light bright enough that she could go to and be persistent and find a way in her broken energy and her broken spirit and fight still just enough to get this medium to say, okay, I'm going. And then stood there with her at the police station while she was talking to the police officer, found the guy that was on the detective on the case, found the guy who could get to the files, and got him to convince and got her to convince the police officer to go back in there and look at that evidence. And by gosh, there was a pack of Marlboro Reds, and in there was that cigarette, and on that cigarette was the DNA of the killer. And wouldn't you know it, this guy was it was in the city jail. He was about to get out in 2 days, and the first thing he admitted, the first thing that he was going to do when he got out was go get him another woman and do the same thing again, because he had been locked up for a while on another charge, and he was itching. And that was his words. So, what do we get from that? The girl didn't come back for revenge. She came back because he was going to do it again, and she knew it. He had also said, later on down the line, had said that he was haunted in his cell. So I think that she was pestering him and she was messing with him. And I hope she was. I hope she was, you know. But they got him. So he didn't get to do it again. And she peacefully passed over to the other side. Was there any communication after that? Yes, there was. Yes, there was. And she was much better. She was all back together. She was smiling. And she was radiant again, and she had color in her face. And she came back and she said, thank you. So, what's crossing over? That's one of the best examples I can give you. If you can cross through whatever light that is, and you can go to the other side, and you can release that pain and those earthly burdens. I've had that happen in my own life with my mother. When I saw her at first, the first couple of dozen times, she was still in her hospital gown, still had the white tape on her arm, hospital tape. She still had, God bless my poor mother, cancer, horrible cancer. And she didn't have any money, so you know what happens when you're in a hospital that's, let's just put it this way, experimenting to try to find a cure, and you don't have a lot of money, and they say they're going to come in and try something that might work. You know, the stuff they put my mom through, I found out after the fact, was just absolutely hideous. And when she came to me, it took me years to understand that being an empath, what woke me up was her pain. I felt her pain. I didn't wake up from a startled sound or, you know, anything else. I felt what she was feeling. So if that's what it's like to be a ghost, to not have the pain end when you're dead, I don't want to be one. So if anything this show does is entertaining and we meet great people in the chat, because I love you all, Aunt Edna and Divine and Grey Wolf and Jackie and Jilly and Patriot and Cassie. I don't know what happened. I didn't block anybody, but I will go back tonight and make sure that I can try to fix whatever happened, so you guys get your wrenches back and you're not blocked. I didn't block anybody, so I don't know what happened. But I am a nut, and sometimes I roll around on my phone in my sleep, so God only knows what happened, but I will do my best to fix it. But the idea about being a ghost, if you're feeling all that still, then why wouldn't, you know, you're crossing over. It seemed that she lost all that. Okay? Because when she came back years later, I would say at least 6-7 years, here she comes in a whole new light, coming in a whole different way. She's not coming in while I'm asleep and I'm waking up from her pain. The first thing I heard was the clanking of my sister's back door, and a very distinctive sound. The whole story is in my book, and I'm sure I've told it before, but I heard the door open and close, but the door didn't move. And I think it's my nieces coming home, and they're past curfew, and I'm like, oh, I'm fixing to razz them, you know. And I lean up because I was sleeping. I was fixing to go in the Army, and I'd left my apartment and was staying with my sister till I, you know, got the bus to basic training. And I hear the door open and close. And like I said, I think it's one of my nieces coming in late. And I'm like, oh, you're going to get in trouble. You better get in there because I heard you come in. You're going to get it. You know, my sister's come down here and just beat the heck out of you, you know. Verbally. I mean, there was no beating going on in the house. But, yeah, we threw things at each other every once in a while. My sister did put a cast iron skillet through the wall once when my my brother-in-law, true story, brother-in-law came home 2 hours late for dinner and said, so what's for dinner? After she had made a special dinner for him and his friends coming, and they didn't show up. They went to the bar instead, and he comes staggered. He comes staggered in and asked, you know, what's for dinner? And she put it through an iron skillet at him and went into the wall and went down. Still there to this day, behind the drywall. But anyway, wasn't, it was more of a fun house. So the door opens and closes, but it didn't move because when you opened that door, there was a thing on it. It was like a fisherman's net with all these shells and those Chinese glass floating ball things that are just like a round glass ball. So it would hit the glass and it would keep moving a little bit, after you shut the door. It just always happened. And I'm looking toward the door and I'm like, where did they go? They moved awful fast if they came in that quick. And I see this little sparkling. It just got bigger. It started getting longer. And it happened kind of fast, and it just like all this light. And I could smell her. There was a smell I hadn't smelled, in like 10 years in real life. But it was my mother. It was a little bit of her shampoo and just a titch of the, perfume that she wore, and how she used to smell when she came in from the cold, and the cold would still be on her coat, and you could smell that cold air, and it was amazing. And I could smell her first, and I'm like, and I was, as the light's just getting wider, and I start to see a form in the center of it, and it's her. No more pain. She's not bent over in pain like she was the previous times that she came to visit. She's standing straight up, hand on her hip like this, big old smile. She's got her makeup and her hair's done and everything. And I'm like, Mom! It was amazing. And the love and the warmth and just the energy, just pure love and warmth, and the smile on her face. She never moved her mouth. I heard every word she said to me. And I was just like, Mom, and she just speaks to me. She says, you're doing fine. I'm so proud of you. I'm okay now. I'm like, you look great. It's just like, this is amazing. You just look fantastic. I was so happy to see her smile, the color back in her cheeks. And I'm like trying to ask questions, but I'm trying to listen to her because she's speaking to me telepathically. I heard her voice outside my head, but inside at the same time. She's not moving her mouth, and it's her voice. Yeah, she was, and Edna, she was sending me off. And I asked her, and Edna, I swear, I looked right at her. One of the few things I was able to get out of my mouth other than just air and go, was, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? And she says, I can't tell you that. Just like that. I can't tell you that. She smiled. She just beamed with light. She says, you have to do this on your own. And you won't see me again for a while. But I'll be here. I'll be around. You have to do this one on your own. And she said she was proud of me and that she loved me. And as she said I love you. I love you. And she all of a sudden just gone. So what do you think? Yes, she did. An interdimensional mic drop, Donnie. I love that. She sure did. But they won't tell you any of the secrets. But in a way, that's cool because it's like, reading the last page of a mystery novel that you've been waiting to read for so long and you just want to hear the ending. Isn't the journey part of the excitement? Some of the things we heard tonight, that's just amazing. To think that a ghost could come back, and there are some other things in there. If you look at, the Garden of Good and Evil, and you look at some of the other things and the other cases that they've worked on, they've got evidence pointed to them by victims that were murdered. And the cases were totally messed up. Some of these you can't quite go back and change the outcome because they're many years ago. But what if they keep hitting at it and they get something that, like they said, if they were to give it to a police officer that was on a cold case and said, go check this out, just like that young girl that said there's evidence in there with DNA, and have somebody listen that has the gumption to say, you know what, I'm going to check it out. And there is quite a few more of those detectives out there than you think. because I do believe there have been many cases solved by paranormal evidence than we'll ever know, because they can't say it is. They have to rig it a little bit to say, I just thought I'd go in there and check again to see, and because it's not going to get accepted in most cases in a courtroom. I mean, like I said, there's two maybe. I know that they just passed not too long ago, where you have to say if you're selling in certain states, if you're selling your house and there's been a murder there or it's haunted, you have to reveal it, which is an accomplishment. And there was one where a judge ruled a house legally haunted, and that was a long case that had to do with people who bought a house that it was haunted. They didn't know. They pretty much proved in court that the person who sold it to him knew it was haunted and should have revealed it, and that's what got the law changed. So there's been a house deemed legally haunted. So there you go. An interesting take, I thought. Again, I apologize. I wasn't able to spend a lot of time with you guys. You guys had some great questions, and I wasn't able to pop them over. I think once we've got Katherine in, because Katherine wasn't able to do this because she's so busy. She does interviews like this. But Carol and Mark really set it up, and I promised we'd keep it at an hour, because she's constantly traveling and going back and forth and doing things for her job. She consults for CSI. She'll tell you, right, if we had had more time, she could have told you exactly what she feels about shows like CSI and all those other. She loves them, but because it's not how it goes in real life, and we all know that. They bunch it all up for an hour, She has different thoughts on that, and I totally agree with her. But she has consulted on a lot of the shows. Basically, she says, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I'm getting it close, maybe paraphrasing a little. She says that basically what they do is they'll call it a consult to get ideas for the show, but not so much as tell us how to structure it, because they just don't work together that way, and it's just a lot longer, and nobody's really consulting with anybody like it is on these shows. So she did write one once, and she is trying to work on another one with the haunted case files situation. So I think that would be very interesting. I've always loved shows like that. I loved what was that one detective one? Was it Psychic Detectives? I think I loved that. You don't really get to see too much of an outcome, and they always tell you that any evidence found is not permissible in court and all that kind of stuff. But again, it gets in there, trust me, because I know of a few. But so there's that. And another thing that you don't think about, and I want you to think about this. Imagine being a psychic. Let's just take my friend for an example again, with the Marlboro Red Pack and the unfortunate young girl, God bless her soul. She sat for 8 hours in an interrogation room once she started saying, most of the psychics that go through that don't have a rapport with the police officers in that county, or they're not familiar with her or him, they get interrogated. How do you know where the body is? Yeah, think about it. So there's a lot that they go through unless they have a rapport where the police call them up and say, can you look into this missing persons case? Can you look into this this case for us, or whatever case it may be? We're looking for a missing person or a body or homicide. So it goes both ways like that. But think about it. You're going to go to the police office and say, I know where a body is. Oh, really? So it's not easy for anybody involved. For all of that to come together is just an absolute miracle. It truly is. But by golly, if we can solve one, I think about all the people that are locked up and DNA helped get released, or DNA put that person there wrongly. That goes both ways too. It's a scary world, and how we're jumping around and still in here in this happy chat and still meeting, every week. It's just amazing. But I'm blessed to have you all with me. Thank you again for tonight. It was a different type of format for me, but I think since we treated Catherine so lovely and she was so, all the mods dropped her links and everything else, she just might come back again. I hope we can hear more about the Garden of Good and Evil. I hope that one gets straightened out, but man, wouldn't it be something if we could all just work together without all these issues and things, right? Just get together, work together as a community. I've said that since the beginning of me doing shows and radio shows and stuff, that, when the ghost shows came around at first, ghost hunters, and I understand why they did it. And I read their books before they had the show. They wrote 2, I believe. And I wrote them before, and I know what they went through. I know what they struggled to. And I'm talking about the original Ghost Hunters show now with, I'll never remember their names because I'm trying to think of them. But you know who I mean. Anyway, they're plumbers. They're taps. So they were together before and really didn't want to do the show. They wrote a lot of contracts and provisions in the contracts that said, we don't want this and this and this and that to happen. And they stuck to it for a couple of years. They were very rigid, but new producers and everything else, you don't know what they're doing behind the scenes. And I mean, it goes off the rails. But the whole idea that they wanted to do was take the feeling out of it. And what I mean about feeling is I feel something is in this room. I feel this could have happened, as far as psychics and mediums and people that are sensitive and empaths and all of that. They wanted to stick to the science, being able to debunk or prove that something paranormal has happened there. So that's why they did it. Then everybody kind of jumped on and started just science, just science, just science, just science. Well, the hard thing about paranormal, it's hard to get a scientific proof of it because you can't get it to repeat all the time, and you could be in a room, and I can tell you this has happened. You're in a room and you're hearing, maybe on a recording after the fact or on a video after the fact, here, don't talk to them, don't interact with them, don't talk to them, they're back again. Multiple cases of that happening. So you're in a room and they might be there and they're just standing there looking at you. We're not saying anything in your stupid device, and we're not monkeys, here to perform for you. We're human beings. So that's, there's so much of that going on in this, in this subject, right? Donnie says you can't get scientific proof for a thing whose definition you can't even agree upon. Perfect. Let's put that up. That's awesome. Exactly. And we can't agree upon. We don't even know what we're dealing with. Zariah Askath said it too. I put that in the introduction to my book. He says that, it's like having 1,000 pieces to a puzzle. You don't have the cover to the box. You're only holding a couple pieces in your hand. You're not even sure what that is. And it keeps shifting. So, there's the thing. It's a fascinating subject. We're always going to be talking about it here. I love that you all were here tonight. Again, I don't know what happened to Patriot and Cassie as far as being blocked. I've blocked no one, so I'm going to go back in there and see if I can fix whatever might have happened. I don't even know how to undo that, so I might need some help, mods. If you know how to do that, Sue or Jackie or somebody, please let me know. Also, tomorrow night, ta-da! Part 6, the final half, the final chapter, the final Cabin 22. I believe we're going to have Connor and Laura on, and we'll be Monday Madness with Steve. I don't even know. Oh, great. Sue knows how. Good. Thank you, Sue. Good. We'll be on that. Sue would be the one. I love you too so much. I love you guys so much. I'm almost I can't wait. It's Friday. It's what am I going to do for the chat? What am I going to do for the listeners? What can we come up with? What kind of fun can we have? So this is what I'm going to leave you with tonight. I mentioned it during the show. And I mentioned it briefly because I just didn't want to forget it. But I saw a movie. You remember a couple weeks back we were doing Ghost Stories Who Got It Right? Excuse me. Ghost movies who got it right. We talked about, Time of Their Lives with Abbott Costello. We talked about The Uninvited, the 1940s version. We talked about the original version of 13 Ghosts. We talked about, Sixth Sense, all of them. We were naming them all off. I didn't know this one existed. So I'm going through, and I just like YouTube, and I like to watch old ghost movies, especially calming down or something, especially during the season. Who doesn't, right? So I look up, and The Presence comes up. And I'm looking at the cover, and I'm looking at Mira Sorvino. I kind of like Mira. She's cool. She's Paul Sorvino. Why can't I say that now? Sorvino's daughter. And she's always been, a really good actress. So, and I'm running out of actors I want to see on screen nowadays. I can't mention why, but I'm telling you. Hi, Daryl. How you doing, sweetie? And my favorite ghost movie is Beetlejuice, Donnie. So, anyway, this might be your new one, Donnie, so check it out. So, I pull it up, and it's free on YouTube, right? So, I'm watching it. Watch this movie. Watch this movie. I don't want to give it away too much, but I have to say this much. Hang in there the first 15, 20 minutes, because basically you're going to see somebody go into a cabin. There's no explanation. She just goes into this cabin. You wonder what she's doing. Watch her as she walks around and looks at things and how she's doing. It's pretty much her and 3 other actors, and all of a sudden you start to see little things that are going on, and you see the ghost, and you're wondering what's going on, and she doesn't see him, you do. And the perception of that, when you start realizing what's going on, and then stuff really starts kicking in, I'm telling you, this movie gets it right down to the influence of having a ghost that knows how to do that has, like we said in the movie Ghost, how each ghost had something that it was really good at. Like the one on the subway could kick the can, but the lead actor's ghost couldn't do it. And he kept saying, you have to think about it. You're doing it wrong. You have to move your energy. You move it with your energy, and you just didn't know how to do that. I imagine ghosts going through that all the time. How do you learn how to do it, right? Which is why I try to explain to people, a ghost that just keeps rapping on the wall, maybe that's all they know how to do with their energy. A ghost that only manifests every once in a while, like maybe you only see half of them, or a line, or a shadow, or something like that, that's all they know how to do, or they're not trying to do anything to show you, they're just existing and walking through. So in that movie, it starts to show you how someone can be influenced. Their mood changes, their how they react to other people out of nowhere. I've seen this in many cases, right? Trying to get a fight started between two because you're getting the energy off of that. This show was amazing. Donnie, yes, I have seen that. I loved it. The guy with the arrow through his head and all different stuff. People try to deal with it. Yeah, it's a good BBC Ghosts. It's worth the watch. So that one was something. I highly recommend it. It's called The Presence. It is on YouTube. Watch it before Halloween. It's free. Free with ads on YouTube, but so worth it. And I don't know how I ever heard of this movie. So if anybody else knows of any other ones that they can throw out there for the live chat, for the listeners that, want to catch a good movie, free on YouTube. I don't want everybody to have to pay for anything. There's so few movies out now that, new movies that are any good. Some of these old movies, actually, the Mira Sorvino one, I think, is only about 6 years old, and she also executive produced it. I think you're seeing a lot of that. Hollywood now, a lot of these actors are going off and going more independent and making their own stuff, so it was wonderful. Yeah, stories from the ghost point of view, absolutely. This is definitely one of them. And not only that, chat, but you're going to love... Ooh, I can't tell you too much. I don't want to tell you too much, but I want to share it. So maybe we'll meet back next week and we'll talk about it. But the way they do it, and the whole light and dark and the evil and good and, the people, how they react. I am telling you now that when you watch this movie, you're going to think there's no way that a ghost, a spirit, a human ghost or spirit, and again, that's earthbound and ones that come to visit, could influence a person that much again. It's called The Presence. The Presence. And it's got Mira Sorvino and like a lantern, like an old cabin lantern on the episode art on YouTube. So you just see Mira Sorvino's face and a lantern. It's called The Presence. It's really good. And it, like I said, it's on YouTube. Just pop that in. You're welcome, sweetheart. So that one gets me because I said it's got everything in here. It's got the fact that one of the characters was abused and has a hard time trusting other people. And what happens when something like that happens to a child? Does it draw other things to that person? Yeah. One of the saddest things I've ever heard, and then I'm going to shut up and we're going to go on and we're going to meet again tomorrow and have a wonderful time with Cabin 22 and Steve and Connor and Laura, and listen to the last part of this story. But one of the cruelest things that happens in this universe that we're in right now, is that when negative things happen to you and that kind of brutality happens to you, it actually draws negative entities to you, and you are further burdened with their evil. Let's just put it that way. And I've had multiple people on this show, and I've talked with them in my personal life, that have emphasized that fact to me. So if you're a child and you're being sexually abused or abused family members or whatever, it causes a kind of depressed, evil energy, okay, that other things like to feed on. And it comes and it finds an easy host or an easy plaything. It comes in and starts messing with that person. So that's an extra universal whammy in my book. It seems like the person is going through enough why would that ever be allowed? But if you think about it as in terms of energy, it makes sense, because that negative draws negative. It's like Tater said, good could draw good, but maybe, just maybe, bad could draw bad. And I think it does. I've seen it way too much. So that's another reason to stay happy and grounded, and try to bring happiness into your life. And even through rough times and stuff, they say laughter is the best medicine. I think there's a reason for that. And I think staying in a higher vibration is definitely a place you want to be. You start to feel down, or you start to, anything else. Just try. It's easier said than done, but break through it and find the positive. You got to do it, or get away from the situation, because it's a horrible fact that the abused are also going to get abused by negative entities, and that's really crappy. And that comes through in this movie too. So please watch it. I think you're really going to enjoy it, and I think Mira Sorvino really needs a thumbs up for executive producing that and taking the time and looking at that script and says this needs to be done. You're kind of wondering in the beginning of it a little bit. You're kind of like, wow, what's going on, and do I really want to finish this? Finish it, because it really gets going and you're going to love it. So I'm glad everybody's agreeing and staying in the higher vibration. We try to do that here. I don't know if we had any in-house stuff to take care of. I'd like to thank my mods tonight. Thank you so much for taking over for me in the chat and welcoming everybody and dropping the links. You guys are certainly, without a doubt, the best mods anybody's ever had. I've watched a lot of shows and I have the best. That's just all there is to it. I have the best chat. I have the best mods, and my guests are just wonderful. I wish your host was the best, but I do the best I can do. So here I am with all my foibles and everything else going on. But I love you guys. And I'm trying to come up with some great shows. We've got, like I said, Rob Guttrow's coming. I've got Pamela Locke coming, which is going to talk about human energy and how to deal with it and how to work with it and how to get yourself out of the darkness. She's going to be coming on as part of my series of what can we do to help each other and help ourselves, And I don't know what we're going to do after the story is finished on Cabin 22. I'm going to miss it because we've had wonderful times on Monday nights. I don't know who's going to be having Mrs. McGee's apple pie moonshine tomorrow, or maybe some bacon caramel popcorn, or some of the other wonderful things that y'all been making and eating and snacking on. Last week I had, what did my son make me? He made me, the Chex Mix. The good old-fashioned Chex Mix that you cook in the thing with oh my gosh, that stuff's so good. I forgot how good that was, especially since you can put extra good stuff in it. And I think we threw some buffalo wing pretzels in there too. Boy, that was a tasty treat. So I highly recommend that, or get yourself an adult beverage. Let's celebrate tomorrow night. Let's celebrate what we celebrate Halloween for the spooky and the scary, and, celebrating, like the wonder of it all and just having fun, I know there's a lot of bad things out there that happen on Halloween, and people tell you it's this and it's that, and all that's true. But what does it come down to, chat? What is your intent? If your intent is to dress up and give somebody a spook, and a boo, why not? Right? It is the best time of the year, Bigfoot and all. Connor, are you joining us tomorrow night? I wanted to contact you through email, but I'm sorry, I've been so busy. I'm a floral designer, and I'm telling you, it's been nonstop at my shop, just nonstop. I mean, it's just been so busy. Intent is everything, Grey Wolf. You bet it is. So that's how we do our Halloween with intent, baby. We celebrate the good and the bad. We want the kids to have fun. We want to create traditional memories for our family. We want new traditions and new celebrations of our memories as children. We talked a lot about that last week, and looking back on old Halloween costumes and ghosts of Halloween past, kind of. And we talked a little bit about those traditions. I'll never forget being able to dress up and walk down those fall roads, and it was West Belmar, New Jersey, to the Jersey Shore, and looking up and seeing the bats circling around the street lights, and hearing the leaves rustle and blow across the street, and looking in the bag. What did you get? I got a Snickers, and I got this, and trading right on the street, with your pillowcase full of stuff, and trying to get to one more house before you had to be home, and going home and checking your candy, and your parents, whatever, say don't eat it all, you're going to get sick. And then they put it in the big bowl and put it on top of the refrigerator. And then after you go to bed, they snag it all. Memories, watching old, movies, and the pumpkin, what is it, Charlie Brown and the Great Pumpkin, and, all the different things like that, so it's great memories. And we're going to create new ones, and maybe by next year I could write a new story and we can go through it again. And I'm going to do vampires, I think, on the next book. So we'll see. I have to talk to Sue and Kiwi Patriot and maybe Katherine too, since she spent a couple of years submerged in the whole vampire subculture. I'm sure she's got a lot of input and look into all that stuff. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. I love you all. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow night. And let's see, did Connor answer me? Hey, Bigfoot Anon, Connor, are you coming on tomorrow night? Are you good to go? If not, if you don't want to answer me here, send me a quick message or an email. If you want, if you don't have you should have my email from last week, and let me know. I hope you can join us. I'd love to talk a little bit about the Bigfoots and things that are going on the mountain, and what's coming up, because we've got a 2-hour part to go through tomorrow night. So we'll see. And it's Monday Madness. We never know what's going to happen with me and Steve in this lovely chat. So I love you all. I'm going to play the outro one more time because I just dig that cat so much. And just so you know, if you've never heard me say this before, most of the music played on this show was written by my husband. The song that I play in my intro and my outro, it's a quick story and I'll let you go because I got to pee, to be honest. Just being honest, we tell the truth on this show. I went to my husband, who has been a keyboard player for 40 plus years, and I was trying to find a song that nobody else used for my intro, and this is years back. And, you know, I don't know if you guys know how it works, but you can't have a copyrighted song, of course. You can't take somebody else's stuff, and you have to pay for a license to use some songs. And, you know, then it's just all this commercial license, non-commercial license. But I wanted a song. I wanted the song to be right because, you know, there's a lot of like really spooky, crazy stuff out there. And then there's just stuff that's a little bit too horror. You know, it's hard. You got to pick. It's got to be right. So I said to him, I said, listen, I need a song. And he says, well, what do you want it to sound like? And I said, I want it to sound ethereal, but spooky. I want it to sound sad. And, you know, a little, you know, a little sad, a little scary, definitely paranormal, ghostly, but I wanted to be hopeful at the same time. I don't know about you guys, but if somebody came up and said something like that to me, I was like, yeah, do you mind? It's not possible. You know what he said? Give me a minute. And he goes over at his keyboards and his Hammond organ and clicks on a bunch of things. He puts his headphones on. And I go off and I do something. About 10 minutes later, he says, hey, can you come in here? And I said, sure, what's up? You know, I thought I was going to have to add a little more or listen to a little riff or something like that. We're all musicians, so we kind of do this anyway. And he plays this for me. I put the headphones on. And I hear it. And the tears start rolling down my face. And I don't cry. You know, I'll cry at puppies and kittens and stuff like that. But, you know, I'm a tough old bird. It just hit me. And I'm listening to how it sounds ethereal. But there's a kind of lilt and a lift and a light and kind of a sparkle to it. And I'm like, that's it. And I named it Spirits Rescue. It's written by Mario Cicerello. It's written for this show. This is our song. And that's what you hear in the beginning and the end. So when you hear this outro, go, good job, Mario. Because he did it in 8 minutes flat, in one take. And I said, took off the headphones. I said, don't change a thing. Send it to me. Spirits Rescue. So there's the story on the song. I love you all. I love you, mods. And it's just fantastic to be here on these nights with you guys. And you guys did such a great job tonight. And thank you for all your kind help. I will fix the blocks and I will talk to Sue. And I will see you tomorrow night with Mrs. McGee's moonshine, apple pie moonshine in hand. And we will celebrate with intent our Halloween season. I love you all. Good night, everybody. And thanks for being here tonight. Great show. What wonderful people. Love the Nesbitts, and Katherine is just amazing. So look into that stuff. The books, again, are Blood and Ghosts. I don't have that one on me. And this one here, what you can't see is the writing because it's green. But you see that right there? Maybe a little bit better. It's a ghost coming out of a chalk mark reaching for help. And I'll tell you what, when I saw that cover, it's kind of how I see ghosts. They're reaching out for help. And I say, let's be there and help them too, because ghosts were people too, just like us. Good night, everybody. Keep your feet under the covers and keep your closet doors shut, because there are things that go bump in the night. Outro number 2 with Spirits Rescue by Mario Cicerello. Love you. Good night.